Greetings. In this video, I'm going to cover some CSS basics. Let's go ahead and get started. So up to this point, you've been using HTML to build your web pages. We've kind of gotten into some of the real basics of HTML, like building a basic web page with headings, paragraphs, links, pictures, that sort of stuff. Now what we're going to do is we're going to explore another programming language called CSS. CSS is short for Cascading Style Sheets. And what CSS does is basically you're setting up some style rules. In other words, we're making things look pretty, or we're laying out our web page in a very specific way. Again, you're using styles to define how to display HTML elements. For example, I have a paragraph. Maybe I want that paragraph to be red and bold and in Times New Roman font. Okay? Well, in order to do that, HTML can't do all of those things. So what I have to do is I have to use another language. Well, that's where CSS comes in to play. As we get further in the course, we're actually going to be using CSS mainly. In other words, we're going to build out our page in HTML, but we're going to use CSS to really make it shine. Okay? And all that starts right now with this video. Now, one of the things historically is when HTML first came out, basically it was just to provide some a programming language that allowed for display of text and sharing of documents across the internet. And there really wasn't a whole lot of formatting involved as far as making a site look pretty. Okay? Well, CSS was brought about, probably about 15 years ago, maybe a little longer. I think it was 1996. Anyways, a long time ago. And they used that to solve the problems of, well, how do we make pages look pretty? Let's say, for example, somebody wanted some text to be red, or they wanted a drop-down menu bar or whatever. Okay. Well, CSS can handle all that. So programmers developed a language called CSS and does all these neat things like that. Now, one of the things, real benefits of using CSS, and we'll get into it later in a different video, but that's using what's called an external style sheet. And that saves you a lot of time because now I can build one style sheet that has a list of rules and it applies to all the pages on my website. And so I only have to make one change and it affects the entire site. Let's say I want my background to be a picture of the Statue of Liberty. Well, if I could go into every single document on my web page and change the background, or I can use what's called an external style sheet, which, like I said, I'll show you in a future video, where I can make one change and the Statue of Liberty now is the background in all of my documents. So saves you a lot of time. Now, one of the things that we're going to talk about first is this. We're going to start talking a little bit about CSS syntax. So, what we have is, well, it's best to just to show you this way. I've created a document, a web page, and I've called it CSS Basic. And inside the body, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a paragraph that says something like this. I'm just going to put, this is a sample paragraph. Okay? Nothing too fancy. If I render my page, you'll see that I simply just have some text that says this is a sample paragraph. Now, I'm going to go ahead and put in a rule that will allow my paragraph to be read. Okay? And I'll go over this in just a second and show you what I did. This is called using an inline style. In other words, what I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, well, I want to use a style, and I'm saying that the rule that I want to use, or the declaration, basically the property, is color, the value is blue. Okay? So what I have is called a selector. In this case, it's a paragraph. Okay? I'm saying that, I'm declaring that I want this paragraph, its color, to be red. And this is what I'll see. Okay? Now, one of the things with CSS that, and we'll go into this in great detail in other videos, is that there are like 10 different ways to skin a cat. In other words, you have several different places that you can put your declarations. You can put them inside the document, as far as up here in the head section. Okay? You can put them in line, like what I have right here. Inside the paragraph here, I've said I want the style color is red. Or you can use external style sheets, where you actually have a rule that the rules are actually in their own file that is then accessed by the web page. Okay. Same rule, color is red for paragraphs, that I have here, and that would be on an external style sheet. Again, real basic stuff here, and we're going to go through all of it in great detail later. But that's how you make basic CSS rule. Okay? You use a selector, your declaration, which consists of your property, in this case color, and then your value, in this case red. Okay? That makes that paragraph red. Now, one of the things that you can do too is this. Now, let's say that I have a paragraph and I want it to be, let me just type this in real quick. Right. So let's say I want to put my style sheet or my rules inside of the head section here. So in other words, I have what's called an internal style sheet. It's in the document that I'm currently working on, but it's all the way at the top in the head section. And what this does is it says any type of rule for this specific file are right here. In other words, I'm setting up the style sheet, and I'm saying that anything inside this open and closing style tag are the rules that apply for this document. Okay? And it's part of a thing called precedence, which I'll show you here actually a little bit later in this video. So here's how you do what's called an internal style sheet. You just type in style, so opening style tag, and then the argument that you have here for this element is type equals open quote text / CSS, and close quote, and close the opening tag. Give yourself a few lines, empty lines here, and then have a closing style tag. So let's say I want my paragraph to be red. Well, then I'll just type in P for paragraph, and I'll show you on the internet where you can get a listing of all these different available declarations here, or selectors and declarations. And I'm going to say that I want my color to be red. Okay? So in order to do that, the rule here is you type in your selector, which in this case it's P for paragraph, then an empty space, and then an open curly, which is just it's shift and then the bracket key, left bracket, okay? Space, and then whatever your property is, and one of the available properties for paragraph is color. Then type in a colon. Now you don't have to type in a space after the colon, but I do because it makes it easier to read, and it's also standard operating procedure to do that. Okay, it's part of best practices. Type in the value. In this case, red is a valid color value. There are thousands of them, millions of them. And then after you're done with your value, then just type in the semicolon, and then hit space again, and then a close curly. And then you'll see that my sample paragraph, when I go to render this, should show up as red. I'm going to go ahead and launch this in Chrome, and it does show red. Now, here's a little thing called precedence that I want to talk to you a little bit about. And what precedence is this. Think of it this way. If I have a web page, there are three things that CSS looks for. The very first thing that CSS, that your browser looks for when it's looking at CSS rules, is it's looking for an external style sheet. Now I'll show you that rule in a minute, what that is. That's actually towards the end of the video here. And that is, it's looking at the very top in the head section going, okay, is there a link to an external style sheet? There is. Okay, now I'm going to go look at this external style sheet and see what properties are here. Okay, what style rules we have. And once it's done that, then your browser then looks in the head section in your document, and it says, oh, do I have any rules here? Oh, I do. Okay. All right. So these rules that I just looked in for your head section, if they, let's say in my head section here, internal style sheet, I have where it says color blue, and in my external style sheet it says color red, it's going to keep the value color blue because it's closer to the code that you're writing. In other words, anything that you have both in line and inside of an internal style sheet, override the rules, sorry, that you have in an external style sheet. And then finally, when you're actually inside your code, right here, if I say p style and my color is blue, okay, this, because it's on the line here where the code's being rendered, overrides any other rules. Okay, that's how precedence works. Remember, the closer you get to your code, the more valid, or the more power, the more precedent this rule has. So right now, even though in my internal style sheet my paragraph color is red, it's going to show up as blue because right here on the line, on this specific line of code, I have the color of blue for this specific paragraph. So let's go render it and see what happens, and you'll see that the paragraph is blue. Now if I do a different paragraph and I don't put any kind of style rules here, then I'll just put this is the second sample paragraph, and this one should show up as red. And it does, because see, there's no rule here on the line, so the next place that your browser looks for is right here in your inline, or I'm sorry, in your internal style sheet. Late night, not enough coffee. All right. So, anyways, that's how real basic CSS syntax works. Again, you have your selector, your declaration, which is your property, and then your value. Again, that W3 Schools tutorial that I've included as a link shows several different examples, a ton of different examples for CSS, and I really hope that you go through that tutorial, work the examples, break the code, fix the code, look at all the different examples, all the different options for CSS, because you will be using a lot of those. Okay? And a lot of them I'm probably not going to cover in these videos. So Again, you'll want to do a lot of reading and a lot of playing around. Now, one of the things that you have in CSS is this. It's called ID and class selectors. So, in the previous stage of this video here, I just kind of showed you how to play around with HTML elements as far as setting up like a paragraph to be blue or whatever. Okay. Now, one of the things that we're going to have and doing a lot of are working with IDs and classes. Now, here are some differences between IDs and classes. A lot of people get these confused, and they're actually pretty easy to tell apart as far as what their use is for. Now, what an ID selector is used for is to specify a style for a single unique element. Okay? So let's say in a given document I have 2 paragraphs, and the first paragraph needs to be blue for some reason. Okay? And then any other paragraphs can just be red. It doesn't matter any other paragraphs, but that very first one, I want that one to be blue. Okay, that's what I would set up in ID because it's very unique. There's only one first paragraph. Okay, now the other thing that you have are what are called class selectors, and what class selectors are used for is to specify a style for a group of elements. So unlike the ID selector, your class selector is most often used on several elements. So let's say, for example, I have some text that I want to have centered. Okay? Well, there's probably more than one paragraph in my document that I want to have centered. So instead of using an ID, I use a class. Okay? Remember, ID is something that's very unique. You may only have one use in that entire document where you need to use it, like your first paragraph. Okay? Or your customer registration form or something like that. Okay? Versus a class might be something like, oh, I need a class for red text, or a class for centered text, or something where there's a lot of instances where I might need some text that's centered, it's bold, and it's 20 pixels in size or something. I don't know. I'm just kind of making things up, but the point is that when you have a class, it's for when you have multiple elements that need formatting. An ID is when you might only have one or two. Okay, those are the differences. So here's what a class looks like, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy my code here. I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call this. Hello, save please. I'm going to go ahead and call this one CSS ID. Or CSS class and ID is what I'll call this. Classes and IDs. Yep, that'll work. Okay, so here's what a class looks like. So a class looks like this. Okay? I'm just going to call it centered text, and I'm going to say centered text, text align is centered, and again that's just another declaration. Okay. There are a ton of them. I'm going to give you a resource that you can look at for all the different things that you can do with CSS. And again, there's so many things you can do. Alright, so I have my text line center, and I'm going to say that my color is red. I'm going to kind of clean this code up a little bit too. There we go. Alright. Now I'm going to do an ID, and what you're seeing here is what's called a comment in CSS. It's actually different than what you see in HTML. And in CSS, when you want to put in a comment, you take a forward slash and then a star, type in your and then a space, and then type in your comment, and then when you're done with your comment, type in star, and then /. Okay, that's a comment CSS. It's real easy, and you can have multiple lines and all that. Just remember star / start your comment, or /star, sorry, to start your comment, and then star / to end it. All right, so with IDs, this is what an ID looks like. Let's say I just want my first paragraph, or first para. And on this one, I want my color to be blue. Yeah, that's it, just blue. Keep it simple. Okay, so when you have a class, when you're setting up the rule, okay, when I'm setting up my with my class selector, it starts with a period, and then the name of the class, space, an open curly, and then your rules here. So text align center, color red. Okay. When I have an ID, the selector starts with a £, and then the name of the selector, and then the rule here, color blue. Okay. Now, in my body here, I'm just going to say this is my first paragraph. And then this is my second paragraph for the second paragraph. I'm going to say this is my second paragraph. The text is centered and red. Okay. So in my first paragraph, since this is the first paragraph in my document, I have an ID set up for first para, and I want it to be blue. So here's what you do. You just put in P ID equals first para. So ID equals open quote, first para, close quote. Okay. And I'm going to go, I'm going to run my code, and you should see that it's blue. Okay. And we're going to get into divisions and all that here later, which is another thing you'll learn. So in case you've jumped ahead of me, you're like, well, why is he doing it here? Well, the reason why I'm doing it this way that I am now is because it's an introductory thing. All right, and then since I have a class that I want to set up, I go down on my next paragraph, and right before the closing of the end of the opening tag and paragraph, I just type in class equals, and then a open quote, the name of the class, which is centered text, and then a close quote, and save the file, run it, and make sure that the text is indeed centered and in red. Okay. Now you can use an ID, you can use a class on any HTML element, pretty much. There's like I said before, just a million different ways to skin a cat. Pretty much anything that you can think of in HTML, you can stick a ID or class on it and format it with CSS. Okay? You can style it. Styling and profiling. All right, I'm going to create a new document real quick, and I'm going to show you the 3 different ways to insert CSS. Now, I've talked about it a little bit earlier in the video, but here I actually want to show you examples of the 3 different ways to insert your CSS. All right, I'm going to go ahead and save this new page as well, let's just call it 3 ways to insert CSS. Sounds good to me. Make sure to save it as HTML or else it won't render. Should have that down by now, but if not, keep remembering that, okay? Okay, there are three different ways that you can insert CSS. You can do what's called an external style sheet, an internal style sheet, and an inline style. Now, an external style sheet is ideal when the style is applied to many pages. In other words, if I have several different web pages that I want the background to be red, okay? Well, I can type that in on every one of those pages, and then let's say I hand this web page off to the customer, the website off to the customer, and they go, no, I want a blue background. Well, now I have to go in and change all of the web pages on that website. It could be 5 pages, it could be 5,000 pages. Okay. And if I use an inline internal style sheet or an inline style, I have to change every single one of those stinking web pages, and it takes forever, and your likelihood of making a mistake goes up phenomenally. Okay, just through the roof. You're gonna make a mistake. Okay? When you go and edit 5,000 files by hand, you're gonna screw up one of them, guaranteed. Now, if I have an external style sheet, that means I make one change, and all 5,000 of those pages are affected. Okay, so again, if you have multiple pages that you want to set up these rules for, then use what's called an external style sheet. This would come in handy with an external style sheet when you have things that are common to every page. Like, for example, if I go out to CNN, okay, just for example here, and I click on any of the links, you'll see that there are elements in this page that are common to every page, like the headings, the links across the top, okay, the way that all this stuff is formatted. Now, if they had to go and change every one of these pages by hand, it would just take forever, and something would screw up somewhere along the line. So all the stuff for the formatting is put into an external style sheet. So every page just references this external style sheet, and they get their style rules. In other words, what does a page look like? You know, we use this heading of CNN Justice and or whatever, and a red background, and yada yada yada. Okay. All right, so that's an external style sheet, and that's how this works. Up in the head section, you have, and usually it's right after meta, before title, you have a new tag, and it's called link. And then you have to tell that link what relationship you want to have. Okay? And that is a style sheet. Okay? And then your type is text /CSS. And then finally, you want to tell it, where's the style sheet? Okay? And that's href. And then you want to say wherever the style sheet is located. In this case, I'm just going to use something very generic called style.css. Okay? Now link, the link tag is a self-closing tag, so just close it out. Okay? Now what I need to do is I need to create a new file. And I need to go ahead and save it as. Now this is extremely important that you have this down, because if you don't save this file as a CSS file, you're not going to be able to get your rules. If you try to save it as HTML or as text or whatever, it has to be whatever the file name is .css. So if I save as type, I just scroll down to where it says Cascade Style Sheets file, and then just save it, in this case, as style.css. Okay? So let's go ahead and do this. We have an external style sheet now that we're referencing. Then we have what's called an internal style sheet, which is also in the head section. Okay? And usually that's put above your title. Okay? And if you have an external style sheet that you're referencing, that should be at the very top. And then your internal style sheet. And the syntax for that, and I've gone over it already, but I'll do it again. That's another tag, and it's called style. And you must put after that type equals text /CSS in this opening tag. If not, the browser won't render it. It doesn't know how to. It doesn't know how to proceed. It's like, well, how do you? I mean, you have the style tag, but what's in it? What should I do? I don't know what to do. Okay, so I say text or type equals text CSS. Boom, works great. Then you put in your rules. And then finally, after all of your rules are done, then you just close out that style tag. So an internal style sheet, you're going to use this when this specific document that you're working on has a unique style. So let's say the rest of my website has a blue background, but for some reason this page has to have a red background. Okay? That's when I would do an internal style sheet, but only for the rules that are specific to this document. Again, all my other rules, like I want pink text and I want it to be 20 pixels and I want it to blink or something, would be in your external style sheet. But your background, that for some reason in this document is different from all the other documents, that would be in this internal style sheet. Okay, that's when you would use that. Now finally you have what's called an inline style. And that would be something like this. I'm going to type in an H3 size heading. And it's going to say, I don't know, sample heading. I'm feeling pretty creative tonight, I guess. Now, for this H3, I'm going to say style. After the opening, inside the opening H3 tag, or whatever tag you're creating, doesn't matter. Right after you type in the tag, before you close it out, but right after you say, well, it's an H3 size heading, but before closing out the tag, or the opening tag, you type in style equals, and then whatever the rule is. So in this case, I want that style for H3, for this H3 heading only, in this document only, would say something like color is yellow. Okay? Just making stuff up. Okay? And then it would be my sample heading. If I go run this you'll see. Okay? Oh God, let's change that. Let's change that to green. Sorry. Gives me a headache even looking at it. Alright, so I have a green heading, H3 size heading, just for that heading. Okay, and that's an inline style. Now, you're really only going to use this if, for some reason, you have to make this change to this specific element. You will hardly ever use this if you're doing really great development practices. If you're practicing best practices. Use it very sparingly. Try not to use it at all. Okay? Now, sometimes if I'm testing out some code and I want to make a quick style change and I want to see what it looks like, then I'll use an inline style like this. But in general, preferred method is an external style sheet. If you have some sort of strange reason why this specific document needs to have some style changes from all the other documents on the website, then you would use an internal style sheet. Okay? And finally, if you really must make a change on the page itself, on that specific element, then you would use an inline style. So let's say I want the background for the entire document to be, I don't know, like maybe blue, for example. Okay. Let's not use blue. Let's use something I haven't done yet. Let's make it yellow. I'm going to torture you guys here. Alright, so here's the element that I need to do if I'm going to do like a background, for example. And that's the body element, or the body selector. Okay? I'm in that external style sheet right now, is where I'm at. And I'm just saying I want my background to be yellow. and I'm giving myself plenty of spaces and all in here. Now I could put all this on one line and it would do the same thing. That'll work too. Okay. So my body, I want my background to be yellow. Okay. And what I should see then, if I run this page, is that I have a yellow background. I could do something else, some other color, some other shade, and I'll get into that later when we start dealing with colors and all that. One of the things that you're going to see a lot when you're looking at web pages and websites that are in production, as far as something like CNN.com or Google or whatever, is that they'll actually have multiple style sheets. And in this class, we're not going to get that advanced. We're just going to use one style sheet, but that's something you may run into, something you need to be aware of. Now, again, you want to watch this cascading order of precedence. Again, it's the first thing you see is what's called a browser default. In other words, whatever the default settings are for the browser. If my browser that I have on my computer is set to red text, or not red text, I'm trying to like 24 pixel font and Times New Roman or whatever. Okay, the very first thing that I'm going to look for, my browser looks for, is what are your default settings. Okay, that's before it even goes out to the web, before it even goes to pull up this web page. And then again, you look at the external style sheet. What are the rules here? And then it goes to the internal style sheet and says, what are the rules here? And then finally to the inline style. And the inline style has the most precedence. In other words, if there's something in the inline style, that's going to be the rule. And then if there's nothing in the inline style, then it looks at the head section of the HTML page to see if there are any rules there. And if there are, then well, then that's the rule. And then if not, if there's nothing there, then look at the external style sheet. And again, if the rule's there, then that's the rule. All right. Let's see where we're at here. Let's go ahead and stop this video for now, and in the next one I'm going to start working on some of the styling. We're going to start with backgrounds and then go to text, fonts, and then finally links for this week. So as always, if you have any questions, just shoot me an email as early in the week as possible, and I'll help you out. And hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks.